She slapped my baby at Christmas dinner. The sound cracked through the room, sharp enough to stop the ring light's hum for half a second. My son's cry folded into silence, but no one looked at him. Not my sister, not my parents. They just stared at me, waiting for the usual me apologizing, me shrinking, me overreacting. I didn't move, but someone else did. My husband pushed his chair back, slow and deliberate, the kind of movement that changes a room before a word is spoken. He looked her dead in the eye and said quietly, "Get out." And I had already prepared everything in silence, trading it for the rest of my life. Stay and tell me whether I was right or wrong. I grew up learning how to disappear long before I understood what the word meant. At 10, I used to stand at the far end of my grandparents' dining room, right beside the old wooden chair with the faded seat. Everyone knew it as the extra chair. I knew it as mine. From there, I watched my sister Marlene, 2 years older, louder, already treated like a spotlight was following her, get moved into the center of every family photo. My mother, Evelyn, would fix her hair, lift her chin, and say, "There, perfect." If I stepped forward, she'd guide me back with a gentle hand and a practiced smile. "Let your sister shine." My father, Harold, never argued. He'd simply adjust the camera settings, pretending not to see me hovering in the corner, pretending not to hear the scrape of that lonely chair as I sat down again. The pattern didn't start there, but that's the first place I can remember feeling it in my bones. When I brought home an award from school, Marlene accidentally spilled juice on the certificate. Mom rushed to comfort her instead of checking on me. She didn't mean it, she said. "You know your sister is sensitive." Sensitive. I heard that word more often than my name. Anytime I hesitated, questioned, or simply existed in the wrong moment, Mom whispered it like a diagnosis meant to excuse everyone else. Dad's contribution was a quiet, steady neutrality. "Don't make this bigger than it is," he'd murmur. That sentence followed me through childhood the way my shadow did, close unavoidable flattening. As teenagers, the gap widened. When Marlene wanted concert tickets, I was told to hand over the money I'd saved from babysitting. "You're good with planning," Mom said, as if responsibility was a natural resource I owed them. When I needed a ride to a school project, they forgot. Twice. The third time, Dad simply said, "Ask your sister," even though she had already left with friends. When I turned 18, I thought adulthood would break the pattern. It didn't. At holiday dinners, Marlene's stories filled the table. If I spoke, someone interrupted. If I disagreed, the room stiffened. "Joy, you're reading too much into things," Mom would say. And there it was again, the cue to quiet myself before the entire table turned. Years passed. I moved out, built my own life, my own rhythms. But the old programming stayed, step back, soften. Don't disturb the balance that protects everyone but you. I didn't fully see the cost of that silence until Rowan was born. When my son cried and Marlene shouted at me for overreacting, something small cracked inside me. Something old. Something shaped like that faded wooden chair. It didn't break open yet, but it shifted enough for me to notice. Looking back, I can name the moment the pattern cemented itself. It was that night, standing behind the camera flashes, when Mom turned to me and said, "Joy, stop being so sensitive." That was the day I learned my place in this family. The house was quiet after Christmas dinner, the kind of quiet that doesn't feel peaceful, just heavy. I was in the hallway, rocking Rowan, feeling the rise and fall of his breath against my shoulder. The red mark on his cheek had softened, but it was still there, faint and accusing, under the warm lamplight. I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, confident. I didn't need to turn to know it was Marlene. My sister stopped a few feet away, arms crossed, her voice already shaped into the tone she used whenever she wanted to win without looking cruel. "You made a scene," she said. "Honestly, Joy, you're overreacting. Again. The word landed like an old bruise reopening. I didn't answer. I adjusted Rowan in my arms, pressing my hand against his back, letting the motion anchor me. Silence usually ended arguments in our family because silence meant surrender. She waited for it the way she always did. When she didn't get the reaction she wanted, she sighed loudly like I had inconvenienced her. "You know Mom agrees with me," she added. "She said you're too emotional to be taken seriously." My throat tightened, but my face didn't move. Years of practice. Marlene stepped closer, lowering her voice. If you want this family to stay normal, Joyce, stop turning everything into drama. You embarrassed us. Us. As if I lived on the outside of a door they kept closing. I shifted my weight, feeling the wall against my shoulder blade. The wallpaper smelled faintly of cinnamon from the holiday candles. For a moment, I just listened to the distant clatter of dishes, to a laugh from the dining room, to Rowan's slow, steady exhale. Everything else felt sharpened and thin. I finally looked at her. Not with anger, not with fear, just clarity, quiet, cold, clean. She blinked, confused by the lack of collapse. "You heard me right?" she asked. "I heard you," I said, my voice steady. And something changed in her expression. She didn't know why my silence felt different this time. She only knew it didn't bend. When I walked away, she didn't follow. She didn't understand that the moment she called me dramatic, the script they had written for me my whole life finally started to dissolve. I didn't break. I didn't snap. I simply stopped shrinking. And that was the beginning of everything that came after. I didn't leave the house angry. I left with Rowan bundled against my chest, his breath warm through the fabric, the cold air tightening around us as if the night wanted to keep me awake. Marcus walked ahead, carrying the diaper bag in one hand, his other hand hovering near my back, not touching, just sensing. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The silence between us wasn't avoidance. It was awareness. Once home, I laid Rowan in his crib. His tiny fist opened and closed as he drifted off, unaware of the chaos he had absorbed. I watched his chest rise and fall, then stepped back toward the hallway where the light was softer. My fingers brushed the bracelet on my wrist, an old habit, and something inside me clicked into place. I didn't cry. I didn't rant. I didn't replay the slap in my head. I moved. In the living room, the lamp cast a quiet glow across the coffee table. I set my phone down, unlocked it, and opened a blank note. My thumbs hovered for a moment before typing the first line, December 25th, 7:14 p.m. Rowan slapped. Then I added the details angle of the ring light, the distance from the table, the time my son's cry stopped. The words appeared clean and sharp, like cutting a straight line through fabric. When I finished that entry, I opened the camera roll and scrolled to the photo I'd taken in the hallway. Rowan's cheek, the faint red imprint, the soft light catching the outline. I saved it to a folder labeled Rowan, Health Notes. It wasn't anger guiding me, it was precision. Next, I opened the family group chat and took screenshots of everything that mattered. My mother's dismissive text from last month, Marlene's messages about filming content, Evelyn telling me not to ruin the vibe with my concerns. Each screenshot went into its own labeled folder. After that, I opened the spreadsheet I used for household planning. I created a new tab. Timeline, another tab. Witness observations, another. Communication logs. My fingers moved faster as the structure built itself under my hands. I tucked my legs under me on the couch and leaned forward, adjusting the blanket draped over the armrest. The house was quiet except for the soft click of the keyboard and the low hum of the heater. Marcus walked into the room, paused behind me, and placed a warm mug of tea at my elbow. He didn't ask what I was doing. He saw the folders, the screenshots, the photo of Rowan. He only said, "Take your time," then stepped back, giving me space to continue. I didn't need permission. I needed clarity. I created a document for all medical notes since Rowan was born, temperatures, doctor visits, feeding patterns. Not to weaponize them, to protect him, to show the truth without raising my voice, to build something solid enough that no one could call it overreacting. The clock on the wall shifted past midnight. I kept typing. At one point, I opened the billing folder, payments, receipts, the usual paper trail of adulthood. I scanned through files, noting dates, cross-referencing them with conversations, aligning patterns I had ignored out of habit. Not because they mattered directly to what happened, but because they proved something deeper. I had been doing the emotional and logistical labor of this family for years, while being treated as the background of my own life. I pulled the laptop closer, creating one final tab titled, simply Recommendations. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't vindictive. It was a list of steps forward for Rowan's care, for communication boundaries, for safety, for truth. Then came the hardest part, sending the email. I drafted it slowly, reading every word aloud in my mind. It wasn't an accusation. It wasn't a threat. It was documentation, neutral, steady, factual. I addressed it to a legal advisor I had contacted once before during a tough maternity leave issue. I attached the folders, the timeline, the photos. My cursor hovered over the send button. I exhaled once, deep and quiet, then pressed it. The whoosh of the email leaving my outbox sounded like a door closing softly. Not dramatic, just final. Marcus returned, leaning against the doorway. "You're sure?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "I'm done being the only one who remembers what actually happened." I stood and stretched, feeling the ache in my shoulders for the first time. The living room looked the same as always, lamp couch toys in a basket, but the air felt different, like stepping into a room that had just been cleaned of something invisible. I walked to Rowan's crib and rested my hand lightly on his back, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing. His innocence felt heavier now, not because it needed protection, but because I finally understood what protection looked like. Strength doesn't always rise with volume. Sometimes it rises with documentation. Sometimes it rises with silence. And as I stood there watching my son, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. This time, I wouldn't fix what they had broken. The house looked different when we returned a few days later. Not decorated, not warm, just dim. The leftover holiday lights blinked unevenly in the window like they were tired of pretending. We were there because my mother insisted on a family talk. Her tone on the phone had been clipped defensive. She didn't ask how Rowan was doing. Marcus carried Rowan in his car seat, setting it gently near the doorway. I kept my coat on. The air in the dining room still smelled faintly of cinnamon and something metallic. The ring light from Christmas dinner sat on the floor, unplugged, its legs sprawled like a broken tripod. Marlene was already at the table, arms crossed, expression rehearsed somewhere between indignation and innocence. My mother hovered behind her as if shielding her from an accusation no one had spoken yet. My father adjusted a chair but didn't sit, watching Marcus with a wary caution that hadn't existed before. "Joy," Mom began, "we all think you misunderstood what happened." The familiar line, a script I had lived in for years. Before I could answer, Marlene added, "You made everything worse by sending that email. You blindsided us." I looked at her, then at the table. The same table where my baby had been slapped. The same table where silence had been louder than his cry. Marcus didn't sit. He placed both hands on the back of a chair, the tension in his arms controlled, contained. "We're here so everyone can hear the truth," he said, voice level. Mom scoffed. "The truth Joy has always—" She stopped when Marcus straightened. He wasn't a man who used volume. He used presence, and right now the room felt smaller because of it. I reached into my bag and placed a thin folder on the table. No dramatics, just paper. Photos, timelines, screenshots, notes, everything clean, organized, unemotional. My father frowned. "What is all this documentation?" I said quietly. "Since none of you looked at him that night." Marlene rolled her eyes. "You're blowing this out of Marcus' cut, in voice calm but sharp." She slapped an infant. The words landed heavier than the folder. Silence rippled outward. I opened the first page. A photo of Rowan's cheek, the faint imprint visible under the hallway light. "This was taken 10 minutes after dinner," I said. "I sent it to a pediatric specialist. Her assessment is attached." My mother's face tensed. "Joy, you didn't have to escalate this." "I didn't," I replied. "The system did." I slid another page forward, my notes on the risk assessment, the guidance from the advisor, the documentation that now existed outside the family's control. "This isn't about punishing anyone," I said. "It's about protecting my child." Marlene's chair scraped sharply. "You're making me look like a monster." "No," I answered. "I'm showing what happened." She stood abruptly, eyes flashing. "You're pathetic, Joy. You always need to feel like the victim." Before the old ache could rise in my throat, Marcus stepped forward, slow, steady. "Enough," he said. Her mouth opened, ready to fight. He didn't give her the chance. He looked her dead in the eye, the same way he had the night of the slap, and said the words that cut cleaner than anger ever could get out. The room stilled. My mother gasped. My father's jaw twitched. Marlene froze, caught between outrage and disbelief. "You can leave," Marcus added, "or we will." The power shifted so quietly it felt like a change in temperature. For the first time in my life, I watched my sister search the room for someone to defend her and find no one willing. She grabbed her purse, muttering something under her breath, but her eyes avoided mine, avoided the folder, avoided the truth. She walked out without looking back. The door clicked softly behind her, a small sound with the weight of an ending. I exhaled once steady, as if I had been holding my breath for years. My mother spoke first, voice trembling. "Joy." "What happens now?" I closed the folder. "The rest is in motion," I said. "And for once, it's not my job to fix it." The house felt lighter after she left, though nothing in it had changed. Same walls, same furniture, same dim light drifting through the curtains. But the air no longer carried the weight of waiting for someone else's approval. It was as if the silence had finally shifted sides. We drove home without speaking. Rowan slept the whole way, his small breaths fogging the edge of his blanket. Marcus kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting near mine, not touching, just there, the way quiet support often is. I watched the city pass through the window, light smearing into soft ribbons. Everything looked strangely ordinary, but I didn't feel ordinary at all. At home, I carried Rowan to the backyard. Winter sun leaned low across the grass, soft enough that it didn't sting, warm enough that it didn't feel empty. I set him down near the patio, and he pulled himself up on the wooden bench legs, wobbling determination pure and uncomplicated. He laughed, small, bubbling new, a sound untouched by anyone else's expectations. I sat beside him, letting the moment stretch, letting it breathe. For years, I had confused silence with surrender. I had learned to step back to soften edges to make myself easy so the family could stay intact. But standing there watching Rowan steady himself on uncertain legs, I understood something simple and irrevocable. Silence only hurts when it belongs to someone else. When it's yours, it becomes something different. A boundary, a beginning. Inside the folder I had closed at my parents' house lay on the kitchen counter, untouched. No ringing phones, no frantic messages, no apologies. Just space, open, uncluttered, waiting. She never came back. The thought settled in without bitterness. Not celebration, not sorrow. Just truth. A clean line drawn where chaos used to stand. The wind moved lightly through the yard, brushing against Rowan's hair as he shifted his grip and took one small, unsteady step toward me. I held out my hands, but I didn't pull him close. I let him find the balance on his own. In that quiet, something finally let go, something I had carried since childhood, shaped like a wooden chair at the end of a long table. For the first time, the silence felt like mine. The yard grew quiet as the last bit of daylight slipped behind the fence, leaving only the soft rustle of winter grass. Rowan steadied himself against the bench, watching me with wide, unburdened eyes. I breathed in the cold air, letting it settle where fear used to live. The past didn't vanish, but it no longer controlled the shape of my days. Families break in loud ways, but they also break in silence. And sometimes that silence becomes the first honest sound you hear. Boundaries aren't revenge. They're the place where your life finally begins. If you've ever lived through a silence like this, tell me what it taught you. Share the moment everything shifted for you. I'm listening. And somewhere out there, someone who needs your story is listening too.